Hello everyone, it's your boy Action Johnny here, back from a long break of YouTube recording at the very least. Yeah, and I had had a sort of hiatus from the game for about 3 months, and then when I got back, I wasn't really doing a lot of YouTube stuff. But at the point in the game's lifespan that we're at now, it's an exciting time to be doing deck techs. So yeah, at the time of the making of this video, the fourth of the 7 clan packs has just been released. That one being the Masters of the Court, the Crane clan pack. And this was obviously hot off the tails of the Unicorn clan pack being released. So these two packs back to back together, have created some potentially exciting, perhaps new unexplored territory for deck building. It's the first time I've really been motivated to sort of try something wacky that has a chance of being a decent and consistent winning deck. So I do like jank, and I do like, fun deck interactions. But sadly, L5R is not really a game that facilitates this a whole lot. In the early life cycle of the game, it's really just been a game about who can build the best good stuff deck out of their clan, and what deck gets the best sort of win results. Because this seems to be the theme of L5R, is based heavily around competitive play. So I did want to build something fun and creative and a bit janky, but also something that could still win. And I haven't really been able to do that thus far with the card pool up until now. So yeah, today we're going to have a look at a deck that ideally wins by getting that most coveted of win conditions, the 25 honor to honor out. Up until this point in the game, while it's been possible, it's just never ever been consistent. A lot of the sort of early strategies around this were based around, at least out of Unicorn, cards like Way of the Chrysanthemum, or as I call it, Way of the Flower, based around yurts and rebuilding yurts and sort of abusing that. But those cards are very flip dependent. You'd see awful cards like Contingency Plan included in those decks as well. That just really don't do anything outside of the I must honor out plan. And the other thing with those early decks is they're very, very fragile. As soon as someone cottoned on to what you were doing, it became very easy for them to disrupt your game plan. So what I really wanted to do was create a deck that could honor out, first of all, fairly reliably, and without really alerting the opponent to your strategy. And yeah, over the last 2 releases, there's been, thankfully, cards that I now feel have basically facilitated that win condition and allowed it to come into the meta for good or for worse. So this deck tech's really going to be having a look at those cards and how that deck works. Right, so the deck is called Fireworks, as you can see here. We are using the new Unicorn Stronghold Shiro Shinjo for this deck. We're not interested in smashing through provinces willy-nilly like HMT is wont to do. Now, I won't sit here and say that this deck is better than the meta HMT deck competitively, because it's almost certainly not. But it does have a big surprise element, and it really can catch people off guard if they're not really clued up on what you're doing. We've gone with the money box specifically because we need lots of money for this deck to work. HMT, however you play it, is only netting you 7 fate a turn. Shiro Shinjo, in an ideal world, will net you 6, then 8, then 10. So you should be rolling 2 extra possible fate by turn 3, which is really the turn that this deck wants to win on. So we'll have a look at the list, and then we'll talk a little bit about strategy and how it all works. So the province lineup is fairly self-explanatory. I put Rally to the Cause on the Stronghold as one last speed bump because I've found that, you will probably have lost 2 to 3 provinces by turn 3, unless your opponent's been super unlucky. So it's just that nice little extra speed bump they have to hit if they make the mistake of going all in, and even if they don't make the mistake of going all in, it buys you an extra conflict while they sort of poke it and suss it out. The row is Before the Throne, which is fairly obvious in a deck that's honor running, because it gets you another 2 when it breaks, and they have to break it to get to your box. We have Upholding Authority, that's in the deck really to scout cards that can disrupt our honor combo, like cancels and attachment removal. Cards will do because even though this deck is a bit more balanced than HMT in terms of stats, Unicorn are still predominantly military. Shameful Display helps with your opponent's Voice of Honor, helps towards your win condition as well. It's a nice defensive province, which this deck is wont to do. You've got to defend a bit more in Shuro Shinjo, regardless of your build, because you need to be able to come into that late game and survive really. So yeah, helps to defend a bit. And yeah, that's the provinces, all fairly self-explanatory. So let's have a look at the actual list itself. I should probably talk about the conflict side of things first. So the reason why, in my opinion at least, honor running has never been consistent is because you need to draw a lot of cards in order to make it consistent. And sadly, bidding 5 is kind of, and at least in the past, has been counterintuitive to that strategy. There's this sort of thought where it's like, oh, well, if I want to honor out, I got to bid 1, I got to hope I have a way of the Chrysanthemum, hope I can get a little 8 honor swing or whatever it is. And hope is not a strategy. You need to have consistency engineered into the deck. And thankfully, Unicorn has a million ways of doing this. Mainly via card draw. We have Spyglass and we have the new Spoils of War, which both allow you to plow through your deck willy-nilly. Actually, before going further this list, I should give a massive shout out to Kalimsha, who really has helped massively in creating the final list that you see before you today. While I built and came up with the concept, Kalimsha has undoubtedly done a lot more fine-tuning of the deck. It's gone through several iterations. In some of the older versions, we had cards like a Perfect Gift for even more like tutor and card draw. They've since been cut because they're not necessary, and actually it's kind of a bad card. We had things like the Gumbai come in, which Kalimsha sort of deemed good for the crab matchup to cancel your Casadas. And yeah, the Dynasty side as well, he had a lot of input in. We used to have Chigati Khan in here, or Moto Chigati, whatever you want to call him. He went on suggestion for the regulars for more Fate and cards. We got rid of Farseers because they're terrible and just replaced them with other Shigenja. Anyway, I'm sort of waffling on, but really, this version of the deck, this sort of tuned up, fairly consistent version, is largely thanks to the efforts of Kalimsha. So it'd be remiss of me to continue this deck tech without giving him a kudos and a shout out. Cool. So anyway, carrying on, conflict stuff. So we've got a lot of card draw. Both 2 turns as well, you'll be bidding 5. The secret really is to play the game like you're not trying to honor out, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's very important that your strategy does not get exposed too early, because then your opponent can switch gears and essentially start working to stop you from honoring out. Really, that can be hard because this deck can just burst insane amounts of honor. I think Kalimsha managed to go from 6 honor to 25 in a single turn. So it's not the end of the world if they do figure out what you're doing early, but ideally that doesn't happen. So early in the game, you want to be playing the deck just like a regular Shiro Shinjo Conquest deck. That means you have to act like you're trying to do stuff. So towards that end, there's a lot of cards in here that are just good stuff, unicorn cards. We've got the Curved Blade, because, we like winning military conflicts. We've got more Katana, because we like winning military conflicts. You'll notice Banzai is out, because Banzai loses you in honor, and we have kind of enough military buffs from Curved Blade, Fine Katana, and to a lesser extent as well, Charge. We're running Defend Your Honor because cancels are good, especially in a deck where you're kind of reliant on events and combo pieces to win. The great thing, Defend Your Honor obviously doesn't work outside of conflicts, but we're always trying to be honor out inside of conflicts, so it'll be live there. And then we have the actual card that facilitates your win condition, and it's this little nugget right here, Festival for the Fortunes. Now, outside of the deck, this card is pretty bad. It costs 3, and it honors everyone. So, really, if you're not playing an honor combo deck, the only instance in which I can see this card being good is if you're running some sort of swarmy build that maybe runs Voice of Honor as well. I don't really know. It's kind of bad outside of honor comboing, so I won't go into that. But in this deck, it's our win condition, pretty much. Well, it's half of our win condition. The other half of which, ideally, is this card, Force of the River, which you all know by now, which summons cards off your Dynasty row as horse spirits that contribute military force to a conflict and go home. Go to your discard pile. They're discarded from play at the end of it. So, in an ideal world, what happens is you get to turn 3, having drawn a huge amount of cards. You have some number of festivals, some number of Force of the River. You might have a charge left. You might have drawn in some charges. You might have drawn into a cavalry reserves, and you just basically set up a conflict where you can pile in as many bodies as possible. Ideally with like one big guy loaded up with stuff, loaded up with military attachments to help cancel if you need it. You play Festival of Fortunes after summoning all 12 water spirits. You get 12 honor from that, all of your other characters, which are all largely low drops in the deck if you cast your eye over to the Dynasty. And at the end of the turn, if you're missing any extra honor, you wait till they fade and you get the rest and win the game. So yeah, it is piece orientated, and it is interactive because you have to be drawing and playing these cards while also acting like you're not trying to draw and play these cards. It's a tough deck to play. There's a lot of maths, there's a lot of counting, there's a lot of like figuring out. You've got to know when to go for it and not be shy when you do, and you've got to also know when to not go for it and not die. I had a game the other night where I died on 24 honor. That was really sad. I made one small mistake and that cost me my win condition. So it's hard to play. So other than the combo pieces, we have a few other critical cards here, one of which is another card in the Crane Pack, Gossip. This card is really great in this deck. At its very worst, you're going to bait a cancel with it. So if you're playing against a faction that's running Edicts or Censures or Voice of Honor or whatever, you can play Gossip and it'll get cancelled. And that's one cancel less you have to deal with. A lot of the time this can be used for tempo plays. I know Kalimsha likes to, if he gets the correct draw, he likes to load up a 2-Fate Border Rider with Spyglasses turn 1, and then Gossip Assassination as his first action in conflict, and just begin unveiling the provinces with the Border Rider and drawing cards all the while. Also very good for dealing with attachment control. The last thing you want to do is get to your turn 3 and realise that your enemy's sat on let goes or calling in favours or whatever, and they can steal all your attachments that will allow you to combo out. So Gotted's a very good, very flexible card. Also helps with things like Phoenix Display of Power, to stop them getting favor. That can be huge tempo on turn 1. The other stuff is all kind of self-explanatory. Talisman is there to buy you more time. It's also there to bait out attachment removal early on. People, like, if they see a talisman in play, they generally go nuts and want to discard it. Same kind of thing with Cloud the Mind. It's to keep you alive a bit longer by shutting down your enemy's most powerful character abilities. Again, also, it's a card that attracts attachment hate. Spyglass we've already covered. It draws you cards. Also there to bait attachment hate. These two guys are basically to help get as many of the provinces flipped as possible early on, because you really just want to be buying cheap and plentiful rather than big and expensive. Ambush, their abilities are helpful as well, but the sad thing is with Shuri Shinju is you actually have to generally faceplant for province effects, which is great. Kind of, not really. And also, if you draw these guys late at the end of the game, they just represent an honor, right? Because you're going to be playing them without fate on the turn you want to do your Festival of Fortunes. Couple other little sneaky things. Cavalry Reserves is a 2 because, first of all, your discard pile fills up a little slower in Shuri Shinjo. Keep in mind, we're not playing Force of the River early because we don't want to lose it or expose it or give the game away. So it generally isn't filling up the discard pile. That's just done by being very aggressive with your discards. It's another piece to help honor out. You'll notice that we've got a lot of low-cost cavalry here. We've got the Battle Maiden Recruits, which is an awful card, but it's 0 cost and comes out for your cavalry reserve, so it's good here. Youth is low cost. Border Rider's low cost. So we've got 9 2-0 costs that can come out of cavalry reserves for extra honor, and then we have, the big boys for it as well, which I'll go into in a little bit. Cavalry reserve still good. It's mainly there to combo again with Festival of Fortunes. Just more bodies. You want as many bodies on the table with no fate as possible on the turn you're going to honor out. And you've got to have the fate to do it as well. There's a sneaky one-of Way in here, and I absolutely love this card as an X1. You never want multiples of it in your hand ever, because it's just bad, and the chances are you're never going to get to play 2 anyway. You get like 1 chance. It is possible to honor out turn 2 with this deck. It's a lot harder because you generally don't have the income. But you can have terms where, you get like a Battle Maiden Recruit and a Sneaky Shinjo, and you flip 2 provinces, so you spend very little money turn 1. Turn 2, you've just magically drawn up into all your combo pieces already, somehow. I don't know how that works. God draw. And you can like 1 bid and get 8 honor from Wear the Chrysanthemum. It's just like a little sneaky one-of that you can play to just speed up your win. It's not necessary. It's very, very possible to win without it, but if you draw it, it really helps. There are some greedy clans as well that will just keep bidding 5 alongside you, like Dragon and Crane and Phoenix. They all want to do that. So even on turn 3, you can spike them with a 1 bid and get the 8 honor that way in some clans. Crab generally shouldn't do that, but I have played games where that has happened. Same with Scorpion as well. But yeah, it's just a great card in this deck as a one-of, so it's in there. It also works sometimes with Gunbuy. You can initiate a duel where maybe you're winning by like 1 or 2, and you don't really care what happens with the Gunbuy. So you bid 1 and your opponent wants to win and bids 5, and you can wear the Chrysanthemum there as well. Same thing kind of works with Defend Your Honor, but Defend Your Honor is one of those cards you usually want to actually cancel something with. I think Kalimsh is running a version of this deck where he's cut a Defend Your Honor and put a Center in instead. That's fine if you want to do that. If you feel confident with your ability to get the favor, that's also completely fine. I don't like Center very much, so I'm not running it. And then we got the Dynasty side of things. So pretty much all the Dynasty wants to do in this deck is either be cheap and playable. So Keeper Initiates can be very good when they don't have a Fate on them. So if you get your Keeper Initiates in turn 2, then turn 3 they're good to go. This guy, Mantis Tenkinja, or Mantis Techno, whatever you call him, may seem counterintuitive to the deck, because obviously you lose an honor to reduce the cost of an event. But he's another Shigenja that can hold the Force of the River. He is also a cost reducer. So sometimes you just need that extra Fate, right? You need that extra Fate for an event. You're on to, let's say you've played your Cavalry Reserves. You need to play your Festival, and you don't have that last Fate. This guy's got your back, sorts you out. Because usually you get a lot more honor back and enough to win the game than he takes away from your pool. You're never really probably buying more than one of him, but he's there as well. Mere Mystic really good, helps deal with attachments. If you can get it honored, it's another point of honor when you sacrifice it. And then for the higher cost stuff, we've gone with Tetsuko. This card, people just feel very threatened by this card out of Unicorn, and rightly so. She's probably one of our strongest Dynasty characters. She forces people to invest more Fate than they want to into conflicts. Sometimes they just leave the conflicts unopposed, and you can just get a flip and a break with her as well. Like you should still be like trying to work towards the conquest victory condition while not really caring about it at the same time. Seems weird, I know. Dio is very good in Shiro Shinjo decks. He's expensive and his stats aren't the best, but Shameful Display makes him a little bit better. He's very good at stalling out a big push on your stronghold at the end of the game, because chances are his ability will be turned on. He can hold Force of the River and isn't assassinatable, which is great. Shahai is just, part and parcel in this deck. She really is the body that you can play at the end of the game that can't be assassinated, that also reduce costs for your all-important Meishodo. So she's kind of like your closer character. Like you spend 4 on her and she might save you between 1 to 3 Fate. Doesn't need to be in the conflict at all. She's just there for the Forces of the River. Yeah, she's really good in this deck. If you want to play a turn 2 and like go and harass some provinces with her, you probably can, but I generally try and buy her on turn 3. Shono is great because you could charge him. He honors himself, so he helps our win condition. He also makes it look very convincing that you're going for the honor victory. For the conquest victory. If you just attack him with larger swarms, trying to buff people up, especially if you play him with your like Forces of the River and stuff. And the regulars are just more economy and card draw. So they all fit the theme quite nicely. So basically every card in this deck is either a vehicle for the Meishodo, or an efficient character to help us win conflicts, or basically honor fodder, as I call it, for Festival of Fortunes. So those are the 3 categories of Dynasty characters. And likewise the conflict deck is pretty much the same. It's either good efficient cards, stall cards, or victory condition cards, or so stuff like draw and the actual combo pieces. Finally, we've got these holdings that are both you always want to see these. If you see these holdings early on, keep them for God's sake. Cycle through your deck faster. Imperial Storehouse is great. Just draw more cards. Windswept Yerp. Again, it's funny, whenever I do play this deck, I never seem to see Windswept Yerp. If you get 2 or 3 of these, oh man, they can speed it up so quickly. So both of these, nothing in Dynasty is really consistent, because your Dynasty is like the one thing that you don't really have a huge amount of control over coming out. With your conflict, you can speed that up considerably. But Dynasty is just like, you get what you get, right? So Some games you'll get lucky and you'll draw your holdings and it will get a lot easier, and some games you will not. With the low drops, they're all just like high value tempo cards. Like Sneaky Shinjo is great for just more fate. You just play him. You buy one character and pass, you get a second character for free, essentially. It's really good early on when you want to be flipping provinces. Youth, yeah, Cavalry Reserves, already spoken about that. Yeah, so really, like, it looks like a fairly self-explanatory deck, but it plays very differently from how it looks. It's tricky. Half of the game is pretending that you're not trying to do what you want to do, and the other half of the game, or the other third of the game, I should say, really, 2/3 of the game is pretending you're just a normal unicorn. 1/3 of the game is playing a huge amount of cards and hoping that it's enough to honor you out. And generally speaking, unless your opponent is onto you from turn 1, they're not going to realize unless they've got some sort of hand scout. It's very hard. Really, they need policy debate or bust. Chances are they're never going to be able to upholding authority because we've got the ambusher here, which is great. So this deck's worst enemies are policy debate because it gives away the game somewhat. In terms of like decks it has a rough time against, the hardest matchups in my opinion are its cousin HMT Unicorn, because that deck can breeze through provinces very quickly, and also like just doesn't give a fuck about 2 of the provinces on a row, maybe even 3 actually, if they're packing multiple ambushes. So you sometimes don't get 3 turns with regular HMT. One thing that can help against that though is you're generally a bit more defensive with this deck, which unicorn mirror, which in the unicorn mirrors a lot of unicorns aren't used to. It's just generally like a break race who can get the best card and outrace the other. Like with this one, you're going all in to defend certain conflicts, because the great thing about Force of the River and Festival of Fortunes is they can both be played in any conflict defensively. Do the Spirit Horses help you defend political? No, they don't. But if you summon them, all that happens is they bow and go home. They're still in the game. Sorry, still in the conflict for the period of time that you need to play Festival of Fortunes and honor them before they disappear. Against Unicorn HMT, you will probably have to like do a big defense, like at one point or another, and probably win the game that way if you can. But it's hard, if they get the God Draw and get their Chags and they go on a rampage and all goes south, it can be very difficult to win against that deck. The other deck it struggles with as well is Crane, especially these dueling varieties that set up really nasty duel loops where they just sap your honor with Daisho or what's the other one, Iajitsu Master or whatever it's called. Some of them are running that new holding as well, which generates honor tokens, and sometimes they can actually beat you to honoring out. I've had a Crane deck drop their bid against me turn 2, which I wasn't expecting, and that pretty much just meant I couldn't win the game because he was trying to set up his own honor combo. But even outside of those dueling decks, Crane's just a pain in the ass because they have Gossip now as well, and they have Voice of Honor and a million ways to turn it on, like their new box and whatnot. So both very hard matches, but they are still both winnable. You just have to not make a single mistake and get a little bit of luck. With any deck that just wants to break your provinces, this has or any deck that also takes a while to get set up, like tower decks, this deck's got a really good shot of just blowing your opponent out. As I said, unless they catch wind of you very early on, there's not really a huge amount they can do to stop you from, if you're playing against a deck that doesn't have cancels or attachment control, they're basically fucked, right? Because you don't even need all your pieces, and it can be pretty easy to honor out versus those decks. I've sort of spoken about the strategy over the course of this tech anyway, but a couple of little like eureka moments for me. Well, in an earlier version, I was considering cutting Spyglass because I was like, oh man, this sucks. You know, it's on my character for like a turn. Maybe I'll draw a card of it, and it costs a fate, and it's expensive, and it's not working. And a meta mate of mine, who some of you might know as the Crane Hatamoto SB, was just like, well, why don't you just put the spyglasses on their characters? And I was like, oh yeah, of course, right. Duh. So that's a legit strategy if you're facing Crab, if you're facing Crane and you know where their Magistrate Station is, Dragon with Fight On, Phoenix of Against the Waves. You know, a lot of factions have a way to ready their guys. Even against Unicorn HMT, if it looks like their Chigati's going to get 3 breaks and there's not really anything you can do about it, you can at least like put spyglasses on him, you know, and hope that you can get something that's going to turn the tide of the game. So yeah, really, really good, but I should say most of the time you are going to be putting it on someone else's character, unless you do the Kalimsha Border Rider 2-Fate Gossip Assassinate start. Yeah, really in terms of strategy, it is very matchup dependent as well. But as with all my deck techs, I like to do a few videos test gaming the list. I'll be recording a couple of these myself. I've asked Klimtra if he wants to do some as well, so we'll find out that way. I feel it's probably important with this deck as well to maybe at least have a video of how it loses, so I'll play a few with it, and I'm sure at some point someone will just stomp me, because it really does feel like walking a tightrope at points. You know, you hold on to a lot of cards, and you only really play the cards that look like you're doing normal Unicorn things. Like, I'm going to charge in a guy and put a blade on him and try and break a province. You know. So that is... it's very funny to play, because, yeah. Half of it is smoke and mirrors. But yeah, that's really all I can say on it without actually playing a game. So join me next time, and we'll talk about this wonderful theory in the context of action. Yeah, until then, sweet friends, until then.